Hey, and welcome back to the PokePopCast. It's been probably about 3 years since we've done our last one. Um, Basically, with COVID and the shutdown of organized play, there weren't live tournaments going on that generated issues that I felt the need to deal with. And number two, more importantly, Pokemon during that time period really increased the amount of training available to Pokemon judges, both in person and online, especially during the pandemic. There was an awful lot of online, and they opened up the Professor University, which if you're a professor and you're not using that, I'll give the link. But as part of that, not anyone could just enter it. You have to send a support ticket showing that you are a professor, and then they will open up access to that for you. So if you're a professor and you're not making use of the training that's on Professor University, please do so. I actually have a video or so in there as well. But I decided to switch my focus a bit. Like I said, Pokemon has really greatly increased the amount of training that is available to professors now. Uh, but there are still some things that I feel need to be discussed. And so I'm bringing my focus a little bit more players and judges. So covering both bases there. So hopefully a little bit of a broader appeal and covering issues that may not be covered by organized plays professor training. So what I wanted to discuss today was the end of the Pokemon trading card game, specifically Roaring Moon EX. It's come up quite a bit lately, and actually the situation has been around since the very beginning of the game over 20 years ago, of the trading card game. But it's been a while since it's been happening with any regularity. But now with Roaring Moon and its attack that knocks out the opposing Pokemon and puts a lot of damage on it. Quite often, with the amount of damage it's putting on itself, it knocks itself out as well if it already has more than 30 damage on it. So we have a situation where a lot of tie games are coming up. Oh, sorry, you thought I was going to be talking about the end of the trading card game in general? Nope, sorry, clickbait. I apologize for that, but I just couldn't resist using the title. So this has come up a lot. As I mentioned, it existed at the beginning of the game as well. There were attacks, cards like Chansey that did damage to itself, or Electrode that blew itself up and did massive damage to itself. So it's not something new that a game ends in a tie, but it has been a while since that's been recurring on any type of regular basis. And so it's definitely worth addressing now because there's been ongoing confusion among both players and professors on how to handle that. So we're gonna address that for you today. First, let's talk about a single game and how it can end per the rule book. All right, so most people are familiar with these, so I'm going to go over them quickly, but I think it's important to cover all the bases. The most common way that a game ends is that one player takes all 6 of their prizes. One of the other ways that happens quite a lot is that one player knocks out all the Pokemon that their opponent has in play. They may still have prizes left to take, but since their opponent has no more Pokemon, they win. All right, there are some people, I'll cover it real quick, there are some novices that think, oh, I don't have any Pokemon in play, I can just put one down from my hand and we can continue the game. And that is not how that works. It is absolutely not on the rule book. You should have put that Pokemon down on your bench so that if your active got knocked out, you could continue the game. But if you have no Pokemon in play, your opponent wins. The third way that is outlined in the rule book is that if you cannot draw a card at the beginning of your turn from your deck, your opponent wins. That's called decking out. There's other terminology people use. They may talk about milling, but basically that is a win condition you do see in the game nowadays with Snorlax deck, stall decks being played. But generally speaking, it's a less common way that you'll see. So those are the 3 common ways. All right, so those are the easily outlined, conclusive ways that players can end the game and get a definitive win. What happens if things get a little more confused? So what happens if there's multiple knockouts at the same time and there's questions about, okay, who wins based on who took prizes first, or both prizes at the same time, or multiple win conditions? So if there's multiple prizes taken and both players, as a result of those prizes being taken, meet one win condition each. So let's say both players take their last prize, or both players knock out their opponent's last Pokemon, because Roaring Moon has knocked out the only Pokemon the opponent has, and Roaring Moon was the only Pokemon that player had, and because it had damage on it, they both got knocked out. So the first thing that's important to know is that it doesn't matter who takes their prize card first. Now, there is an order to who takes their prize cards, which matters inside the game if it's not the end of the game. Who's going to promote their new Pokemon, who's going to discard their knocked out Pokemon, promote a new Pokemon first, take a prize first. That is outlined in a ruling in the compendium, and the link here. But we're talking about the end of the game. So at the end of the game, if both players are taking their last prize at the same time, but both got knocked out, or one's taking their last prizes and the other player doesn't have any more Pokemon left, that's where both players meet one win condition, and that causes a tie. But we're going to get into it. A tie is not the end of the story. The next step, though, is you have to look and see, does one player meet multiple win conditions and the other player not? So let's say one player took their last prize cards and their opponent has no more Pokemon left in play, whereas the other player just took their last prizes, or the opponent has no Pokemon in play. So they're only meeting one win condition. So one player's meeting two win conditions and the other player's meeting one win condition. So in that situation, the player who meets multiple win conditions wins. End of game. They get the win. But if both players meet one win condition, that game is unresolved and you have to go in tournament play to what's called the tiebreaker. Now, if you're playing the Pokemon trading card game online, the online game, or if you are playing a friendly game and using what's in the rule book, it talks about sudden death. Sudden death and tiebreaker are almost the same. There's basically one difference. Tournament play uses what's called a tiebreaker game. And the difference between a tiebreaker game and sudden death, in tournament play, each player sets up their full 6 prizes. Whereas in casual play or the online game, you'll find where it's called sudden death, you'll find that players set up only 1 prize. Now, the two big questions here. Number 1, why? The difference. And number 2, how many prizes do you have to take? A few years ago, there were issues in sudden death games, which was what was done back then, with cards like N, or some of the Ultra Beast cards that had much stronger effects when there was only 1 prize left. And so players, if they managed to get to go first, or at that time I think supporters could be played first turn, but in any event, whoever got to play a supporter first, since there was only 1 prize card, if they got the supporter N, or played one of the Ultra Beasts that had a really very powerful attack or ability when there was only 1 prize left, they had what was determined to be an unfair advantage to win the game, because they could get set up, they could do what they were doing, or they had their Ultra Beast, they could do this very powerful attack, boom, get the prize for no investment. other than that there was one prize card left. So Pokemon Organized Play, they couldn't change the rules on sudden death, but what they realized they were able to do was to change the tournament rules. So that's why we have a different rule for casual play, which is the general rule from Japan. And in tournament play, which Pokemon Organized Play has control over, they created what they called tiebreaker games, which basically has the same purpose as sudden death, with the only difference being that all 6 prizes are placed out. So currently we don't have N in the standard format anymore, but we do have other cards such as Iono, which has a very similar effect, except instead of shuffling the hand into the deck, it gets placed on the bottom of the deck. But the end result is the same, that you're left with 1 card if there's only 1 prize out. So the issue would be the same now. So we still use tiebreaker games instead of sudden death in tournaments to avoid that overpowered scenario. All right, so that's the tiebreaker game. That's going to resolve the game that ended in a tie. Now, when do you not resolve a game that ended in a tie? If the match has come to an end and time has expired, and either players are in their +3 turns or time just expired, you don't start a new tiebreaker game. The match is finished. And this is where it can be different. It's also important to take into account whether you are in Swiss rounds or whether you're in Top Cut. Top Cut is single elimination. You have to have a winner for single elimination so that one player moves on to the next stage. You do not have to have a winner for the Swiss rounds. A match can end in a tie in Swiss rounds, but a match cannot end in a tie in single elimination. All right, this is where people really get confused. So I'm going to say it again. Games cannot end in a tie. However, if in Swiss rounds time in the match has expired, then that game may be unresolved and the match may be unresolved, which would result in a tie. Okay, so it's really the match that is ending in a tie, not the game. The game is unresolved because you ran out of time after you play your +3 turns, whatever. But you don't get to start a new tiebreaker if you're already in your +3 turns. Single elimination is different because not only can a game not end in a tie, it might be unresolved, but it can't end in a tie, but a match cannot end in a tie in single elimination, or Top Cut as it's commonly called. So even if time has ended, if the match has not resulted in a winner, so when would a match not result in a winner? So a match can have a winner if game 1 has a winner and game 2 has not resolved. So in that case, if you have a unresolved or tie game in game 2 and time comes to an end, you don't do a tiebreaker because game 1 has already decided the match. You don't have to resolve game 2. Game 2 can end as unresolved, and game 1 declares the winner of the match. But now if you're in game 3, and so each player has won one game. One player won game 1, other player won game 2. Now game 3 has come to an end. The time has come to an end, or it's ended in a tie. You have to resolve that match, and you're going to resolve 2 if time is left too. I want to be clear on that. If there's still time in the match, you're going to do a tiebreaker to resolve game 2. You only don't do it if time is up. But with game 3 or game 1, regardless of whether time is up or not, you have to have a resolution to the match, and so you have to have at least one player having won one more game than the other player. So in game 1, if it's unresolved and there's time left, or it's at the end of time, you're going to have a tiebreaker game. In game 2, if there's time left, you will have a tiebreaker game, but you will not have it if time is up. Game 3, however, you have to have a winner because one person won Game 1, another person won Game 2. You have to have a winner for Game 3 in single elimination, right? Not in Swiss. Swiss can have a tie match, but there's no tie match in single elimination. So in those cases where you have to have a resolution to the game, or there's time left in the match, you're going to set up and play a tiebreaker game. Now, I want to be very clear about something. When I'm talking about in Top Cut, Game 1 or Game 3 or even Game 2 being unresolved, I'm talking about one that came to a tie ending in the game because of Roaring Moon EX or some other effect where both players are meeting win conditions, and so you have to have a tiebreaker. If Game 1 or Game 3 are in progress and time is called, you don't go to a tiebreaker for that. All right, so if Game 1, if you're in single elimination, and this only applies to single elimination, if you're in Game 1 or Game 3, and since the match has to have a winner, and the game is not finished, it's not ended in a tie, but it's not finished, neither player has met a win condition, then play after the +3 turns, and you know, if you're still in that situation where nobody has met a win condition, then you do one of two things. Since with single elimination, you have to have a winner. First, you look at the game state and see, is one player ahead on prizes compared to the other. If one player is ahead on prizes, there's your winner of the match in Game 1 or Game 3. Game 2 can just end because Game 2 does not need to have a winner in order to have the match have a winner. If neither player is ahead on prizes, but neither player is meeting a win condition, you do not set up a tiebreaker game in that case. The players merely continue playing the game until one or the other either meets a win condition or gets ahead on prizes. Now, remember, you have to resolve everything. It's not like, oh, he drew his prize first, you know, 2 knockouts happen at the same time. He took his prize first, therefore he wins. Nope, you have to resolve the other knockout. So once all knockouts have been resolved, if one player is ahead in prizes compared to the other, that player wins the game, and in Game 1 or 2 in single elimination, therefore wins the match. All right, so just want to be clear on that. That's another point that people get confused a lot on. So remember that. You don't do a tiebreaker game unless players have both met win conditions. That's the only time you're doing a tiebreaker game. I take that back. There's one more time you'll be doing a tiebreaker game. In single elimination, if Game 2 has completed and both players have won one of those games, but Game 3 has not started yet, then in that case, you would do a tiebreaker game to resolve the match. Because you're not starting a new game when time is over, but you will have a tiebreaker game. And basically, you're fully set up, and just as soon as someone gets ahead on prizes, they win. There's an important thing, too. If you're at time or nearly at time, what determines, this applies to Swiss rounds too, what determines if you get to start a new game if time has been called after you finished your last game, right? So you're in a match, best 2 out of 3, you might be tied up 1 game each, or maybe someone won the first game and the other person is trying to get win the second game so they can get a tie for the match, at least get 1 point. So you've finished up the game you're doing, you're shuffling up, and as you're shuffling up, time's called. Now normally, if the player who lost the previous game, or if it's a tiebreaker game, if a coin flip hasn't been done, you don't get to start a new game and play 3 turns in Swiss rounds. However, in the Pokemon tournament guidelines, a game is considered to have started once it is determined which player is going to go first. So if the losing player in the last game declares, I'm going to go first, or I'm going to go second, or in the case of a tiebreaker, if that coin flip has been done, even though you're still shuffling and haven't set up yet, you still get to do your 3 turns because you have started the next game by declaring who's going to go first. So that's a real pro tip. That's key. If the players have determined who's going to go first and second in the game, whether by coin flip or by declaring it, that game has started and they get their 3 turns. Now, are you going to be able to win a game in 3 turns? Maybe not a full game, but it's possible. There are occasions where your opponent only has 1 Pokemon out there and you get to knock it out and boom, you win. Or if it's a tiebreaker game, you're able to take a prize within 3 turns. That's certainly possible. So very important. Make sure to declare as quickly as possible who's going to go first so that you get your 3 turns. Otherwise, if you haven't declared, the game hasn't started and you don't get your 3 turns if time is called before you've started. Okay, so you play a tiebreaker game. It's set up the same as a normal game. You're both putting out 6 prizes. It follows all the same rules as a normal game in terms of what you can do, the player who goes first, what they can do, effects that can be done on the first turn, such as Squawkabilly EX has, and things like that. The only difference is, even though you're only putting out 6 prizes, once somebody has gone ahead and taken a prize, and again, all effects have to resolve before you determine win states. So if there's multiple knockouts, those multiple knockouts have to be taken into account. But once one player gets ahead on prizes, that's the end of the tiebreaker. Okay? The only reason you're putting out 6 prizes is to avoid issues like now, as there was an issue with N years ago when they first introduced this, there would now be an issue with Iona. So that's about it. I think that's everything we need to cover. So I'm going to be doing the PokePopCasts, as I said at the beginning. We're going to keep doing some PokePopcasts and focus mostly on things that will help both judges and players. So hopefully you found this useful. If you're out there playing Roaring Moon EX, you should definitely know how it works because you're going to be coming into this situation a lot. But even if your opponent is the one playing Roaring Moon, it's good to know what's going to happen and be aware of what you can do to put yourself in a good position for winning, if not that game, the tiebreaker game that will come from it. Okay? So, get that damage on Roaring Moon so that if he frenzy gouges, he's taking himself out as well. One other thing I want to touch on, actually. We're seeing Emergency Jelly being played as well, played in the Roaring Moon deck. Note that Emergency Jelly does not trigger until the end of the turn. So attacks happen, knockouts are resolved, prizes are taken, and then the turn ends. So Emergency Jelly would not be in time to save a Roaring Moon EX that has too many damage counters on it. Okay? Alright, that's it for now. Hope to see you soon. Look for me at events, and take care. Thank you.